Welcome to Radlett. We're at Battlers Green Farm. We're in my 997 GT3 RS 4 litre. As you know, if you watch the channel, I like doing comparison videos, drag racing, on the road. So I thought I'd bring along another interesting car today to compare to mine. My friend Natalie has a 991 GT3 RS, which I think looks absolutely stunning. I think what looks really nice about this car is how the rear wheel sits so close to the arch, and they're 21-inch rims, 21-inch. So I think they're 20 on the front, 21 on the back. I love this deep dish. So I've driven Tom's car, TGE, but I drove it around Berkeley Square in central London. It wasn't really a real road test. So I'm going to drive this today. I'm going to drive mine back to back and see how they feel. Now this one obviously has a very similar engine, but it's not the Metzger engine, but it still is a 4 litre flat 6. And bizarrely, they're exactly the same brake horsepower, 493 brake horsepower in both. But obviously the big difference is this has a PDK gearbox, and this one actually revs up to 8,800 RPM, so 400 shy of what my car does. And this car is a little bit heavier. I think it comes in at about 1.5 tons, whereas mine comes in at about 1.36. So very different cars maybe, but also both of them GT3 RSs, so they both should be really fun to drive. Let's take them out and see how they compare. And the handling really makes it an entertaining car to drive. One of my favorite cars of all time. I can't actually think of another car I would prefer to own over this. The only car that I really aspire to own over this is an F40. The only downside to this car, which I will say, is you don't want to use it as a daily car. The clutch is not light, and you start driving around town, that clutch gets on your nerves. But that for me is the only downside. Oh, and there's one other. It doesn't have a lift system, so if you get caught in a tight spot, speed humps, you can't lift the car up like on the new 991. So it does make it a little bit impractical to use as a daily, but then I'm not sure how many people would want to use this as a daily. It's a special car, you want it for special occasions. So why don't we jump into the GT3 RS and see how that compares. I have to say, we're just pulling up to it now, and it looks absolutely sensational, the new car. Sounds weird, I just don't know what I feel. I don't know how I feel about it at the moment. It's actually surprising me.
Does it feel too normal?
No, not at all. It feels incredible. It feels a bit like the Lambo, just a dialed down version of it. Definitely doesn't feel as light sound to it. It doesn't sound so great on the downshifts. So when you go from third to second, doesn't sound, there's no real sound. But when you're going through the gears, up through the gears, it makes a really lovely noise, especially when you got it in PDK Sport and it goes all the way through to 8,800 RPM. I think this is a much easier car to live with because it's got the PDK gearbox. But it's driving the car now for half an hour, and these are my thoughts. I'm going to give you 5 things that I like and 5 things that I dislike. So the first, I love the looks. This looks a lot meaner than the 4 litre, I think. The 4 litre looks quite dainty next to this. This has those lovely big 21-inch wheels and the big scoop on the side, and it looks really aggressive. So I love the look of the car. I like the fact that you can go all the way up to 8,800 RPM in this, and you've got the PDK gearbox. So the PDK gearbox, I think, is a positive thing because you can use the car more often than you would with a manual gearbox. I like the interior. The interior is really lovely. It's got carbon everywhere and Alcantara. It feels a very nice place to be, and the visibility is actually really good. It's something I haven't talked about with this car, but you've got really good all-round visibility, which you don't get in a lot of supercars. We're back at the farm now. I've driven both cars back to back, the 4 litre against the GT3 RS. The biggest difference for me between the two cars is the steering. This feels so direct. It feels almost like a go-kart, and actually you can feel the weight difference too. When you're driving this, it feels nice, light and balanced like a go-kart. The GT3 RS feels a little bit heavier, not as responsive, and you don't get that lovely sound when you're going on the downshift through the gears. However, for £160,000, I don't think there's a better car out there from any brand actually. I think the engine is really fantastic. The PDK gearbox allows you to use the car on a daily basis, and you've got that lift. So you can drive into central London, you can drive around in cities, speed humps, and the car is easy to drive. My car, over speed humps, you can see how low it is there. It doesn't go up. So over speed bumps, you just got to be so careful. At the end of the day, these are two cars that are designed for the track. So that's really where they're at home. I would say that actually driving this though at lower speeds is much more involving. The RS, the capabilities of this car are so much higher. It revs up to like 8,800 RPM, and by the time you're at 8,800 RPM, you're going so fast you can't enjoy that car in built up areas in the cities. Very similar to, as I said, to the Ferrari 488 GTB, which doesn't come alive around town. You really need it on a racetrack or a really nice big open country road. But two fantastic cars from Porsche, one of my favorite brands still. And after driving these two cars back to back, I still think about the GT4 and the Boxster Spider that I've now got, the Boxster Spider, and I drove the GT4 on the last video that you saw, the comparison. And the GT4 and Boxster Spider really is a very compelling package for the price, around £75,000. So if your budget is £75,000, GT4 Boxster Spider. If your budget is £160,000, GT3 RS. If your budget's £200,000, Performante Coupe. And if your budget stretches a little bit further, you want to get one of these bad boys, one of 600, my favorite car. Thank you for watching. Please leave in the comments which one you prefer, and we look forward to seeing you next time.